Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 23 of B-Road Ballers, the review series for the hot hatches, old and new, big and small, powerful and not necessarily as powerful, that are featured on Gran Turismo. And in this episode we're featuring one of the most iconic hot hatches, not only on the game, but of all time in real life as well, the Mini Cooper. Now, this is not the classic Mini, this is the 1998 1.3 injection Mini produced by BMW. It looks pretty much exactly the same as the classic Mini, but it has an updated interior, updated electronic systems, technical stuff, updated quality, updated reliability, etc. So it essentially captures the charm of a classic car, but with the advantages of a modern car. And personally, I really don't understand why more companies don't do that, because it's a brilliant concept to make a car that looks classic, but is fitted with all the latest gadgetry underneath. They could quite easily update safety systems on classic cars, as this car proves, so I really don't get why more manufacturers don't do that, especially for older drivers, who I know for a fact would love to see some of their childhood favourites come back as production cars. But anyway, that's off on a tangent. We are discussing this car in particular, the 1998 version of the Mini. It's a pretty popular hot hatch on the game. You don't tend to see it so much in racing though. It tends to be more just in cruise lobbies. People like to pull out this car to have a bit of fun. And you can see why. I mean, it's a Mini. It's known as being one of the most fun cars ever made, especially on a budget. And that applies in the game as well. The budget is very, very low for this car. Not including tuning, of course. This car will only set you back just over 18 grand. So even for a hot hatch, it's very cheap. And in effect, the funny thing about the Mini is it's essentially a European equivalent of a K car. Similar size, similar power even, at 63 horsepower. In the case of the classic Mini, I can't recall if this one has that as well in stock, but I believe it does. So in many ways it's very similar, and also like a K car, it does a lot with a little. In fact, this was the car to pretty much start the trend of doing a lot with a little for the mainstream market. On the game fully tuned, you can fit it with a turbo and produce what I personally found a quite surprising 262 horsepower, which is pretty impressive, especially again if you compare it to something like a K car. We reviewed the Daihatsu Core a few weeks ago in this series, and that car produces no way near that kind of power. This is almost 100 horsepower more powerful than that Daihatsu. Now obviously this car is double the size in engine capacity, which is quite a funny thought considering that even this is only a 1.3. But that does give it significant advantages in what the engine is capable of, amongst other things of course, but that being a primary one. So 262 horsepower and, again, a pretty healthy 204 pound-feet of torque in a car that only weighs 640 kilos. It's, as you'd probably expect, front-wheel drive, and it puts out a very impressive 409 horsepower per tonne, which is pretty amazing for a hot hatch in general, let alone one with not so much power compared to some to begin with. So how does it compare to the newer Minis? Because we reviewed one of those as well in the series before, and it turned out to be a fantastic sleeper car. So what about this one? Well, overall, this isn't as much of a sleeper car, because more people know that it's fast, but it's still a sleeper in that it's a lot quicker than it deserves to be, or a lot quicker than you'd expect it, technically, especially on paper, to be. Especially in a straight line. It's very quick, it has incredible acceleration for a front-wheel drive hot hatch, mainly due to that ultra-low weight. It's essentially got all that power, picking up nothing, in effect. So the power to weight really serves to its advantage. Top end, it's not amazing, but you wouldn't expect it to be. And the main thing about this car that most people enjoy to utilise is, of course, its handling around corners and its performance around especially twisty circuits. And that is by far its best point. The handling is phenomenal, the turning is great. Being front-wheel drive, the car just naturally follows the front wheels wherever they go. And it's essentially like driving a mainstream go-kart. It's a great little car. It's significantly cheaper than many sports cars of a similar spec. There aren't many, but there are some. And overall, it's a very viable and interesting alternative to pretty much any of certainly the smaller hot hatches in the game, but also many of the bigger, more powerful hot hatches. Because even though this car doesn't have, say, 400 or 500 horsepower like some of them do, what this car does, again going back to the Daihatsu, what it does with its power is so great, and that is what makes people love the car so much. So if you don't own the Mini already, what are you doing? Have you been under a rock or something? Does anyone not own this car on Gran Turismo? It's such an iconic car, even for people who aren't necessarily the biggest fan of it. I know I'm not personally. But even then, we tend to still pick this car up at some point along the way. Even if you don't own it anymore, you've probably at least driven it at some point on Gran Turismo, because it's just so unique on the game. The game, of course, used to actually have the original Minis, but then they were lost for a while from the game, and now they've come back. And it is great to see them back. So, if you're looking for a very unique alternative of which really blends classic and modern advantages together in a great, ultra-compact hot hatch package for a very good price, this is a great car for you. So, that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.